Hi everybody. In this sphere render video, we're going to take a look at the creation of an overcast scene within D5 render. Now, the overcast look has become very popular recently, mostly due to a handful of very awesome users who've created amazing content. They've really popularized the look. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show off 3 different setups. Each one will be overcast in its own particular way, and I'll explain the settings that I use, the light sources that we're using, and how to get the overall look. Now, this is just one way to go about it, and there's probably lots of different ways to get that beautiful overcast look within D5. We'll also take a look at the AI enhancing tools within D5 render, which do seem to be very important if you really want to elevate your work, especially for still renders. We'll take a look at some of the results of the AI enhancer on these projects. We'll also talk about some of the issues and criticisms with the use of the AI tools. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, everybody. So here we are in our demo test scene. And you can see what we have is a grayscale sort of cabin out in kind of a woodland area. We've got a lot of grass on the ground, and we've got some nice pampas and sort of these like big mondo style grasses, so big fluffy pampas style grass. We've got a nice wall of foliage all the way around our scene, and we've got a lot of different grass, and this will become really important later on. Now, let's take a look at scene 1. So we have 3 scenes in total, and I'm going to run through the lighting setup and the settings that I've used to get this particular look. And this is the best that I can approximate that very beautiful overcast look. Let's go ahead and click on scene 1 here. You'll notice a couple of things, and first thing I want to mention is one of the reasons I think this overcast look is so popular is because of the way it handles shadows, particularly the shadows within trees and foliage. If you look outside on kind of a grayish day, you'll notice how dark those shadows actually are. And you can see, if we look at this tree right here, it's so close to the camera, but look how self-occluded the foliage actually is. And I think that more realistically mimics what the human eye sees when we look outside. You don't generally have, very well lit up trees, kind of like this. This is just a little bit too bright. And so I think this sort of look reads very well. Now, the second reason I think it looks very good is because you don't have extremes like of highlights or blown out areas. So in other words, you've got a very dark background and then buildings, which are usually lighter, coming kind of in the middle or foreground. I think it just makes them very, very readable. And so all in all, it's a pretty nice look. For this shot, I was very heavily inspired by Koto Cabins, which is, I believe, an English cabin maker who does these really stunning cabins. We'll take a look at that in another video. I've also gone ahead and decorated just a little bit on the inside here. We've just put some D5 standard materials, added some lights, and some of the newer D5 artwork, which is really, really good stuff, by the way. This is just going to light up the interior just a little bit. The glass is pretty much default glass. I've made it a little bit more specular and slightly darker in color. But other than that, everything is just pure standard D5. For scene 1, the approach I used was to actually go here to the top left, use the D5 Studio, and I believe this is restricted to Pro members. I'm going to click on the Studio, and I'm going to go to D5 Curated. And you'll notice that we have a lot of these pre-made presets. These are made by really fantastic D5 members who have allowed their scenes and the lighting setup to be used by other people. It's really, really nice and just great, great stuff. But there's a lot of different exterior overcast, interior day, interior overcast. There's just lots and lots of them. But the one that I found gave the best result was actually this little guy right here. So exterior / overcast, and it's got the field and the trees. I mean, you can see by the thumbnail, it already looks really, really good. Now, please note, a lot of these overcast images probably share a lot of the same foundational settings, but this was the one that I zeroed in on after testing all of the others because it gave me the best initial result. So mad mad respect to whoever created this one. So all you have to do is double click and turn that on. Now there's a couple of other settings. This will get you quite far, but it won't get you all the way. And so in order to do that, we need to just look at the environment. You can see when we actually download that user created lighting setup, it is going to come with a couple of things. The first is that it is going to use a particular HDRI. You can see it is right here. Now the settings that I've gone for involve putting the light strength to 0.600, so less than 1, so 0.600. And you can see I've also put the background strength, and the background strength is going to be how bright that is actually going to look. And again, 0.600. Now, wherever possible, I've tried to simplify this lighting setup. And you can see the skylight strength is going to be effectively that. How strong is the light from that HDRI? All right, and again, 0.600. Please note, this is just foundational. You might want to change these settings yourself. Rotation-wise, I just kept it at its default, put it back to 0. And you will notice that this default scene does come with an extra sun. This is effectively making it more of a, like, it's not just using the default HDRI, it is adding an additional geo and sky sun. In this case, what I ended up doing was just kind of fiddling with the settings a little bit, but a very low intensity here, and the temperature is a little bit into the warmer. I've turned off all fog, wind, precipitation, anything else. I don't want anything else in the shot except really that gray sky. Now this brings us then to the effects. And by the way, I'm trying to cover everything that I can here for these settings. If I missed something, I'm sorry. Genuinely trying to make sure everything is as simple and as clean. Okay, under the effects tab. Now you can see when you download, if we were to download any one of these little guys here, these studio scenes, they will appear as a LUT. I'm not entirely sure how D5 is sort of doing this exactly. A LUT is a lookup table. It's just a way of affecting the overall sort of the colors within the image. It's considered a dumb way to do it because it's kind of a catch-all. D5 seems to apply all of that color information as a LUT, and you can see you can control the intensity of this. Now, I believe when I first downloaded this, it came in at somewhere closer to the half, so you can crank it. I found cranking it all the way up to 1 is a really good way to do this. Manual exposure, you have got to turn off. Auto exposure, you can see what D5 does there. This is true of, I think, at least all the 3 rendering programs, Lumion, D5, and Twinmotion that I use and teach. Turn that little fella off. There's no magic number for that. You're just going to have to adjust the exposure then to fit your actual scene. This is really important for these shots. Highlight local exposure. You can see what this is going to do is either clamp or not, effectively not clamp basically how bright some of the local elements are. So I actually want to make sure that I am clamping this. I don't want these sort of bright spots that you can see in the image. So for scene 1, I took this all the way to the right. And shadow local exposure, you can see if I wanted to lift up or brighten the shadows in the image, I don't. I want really dark shadows. And so you can see shadow local exposure somewhere in the, all the way to the left, all the way to the right, all the way to the left. Really dark, self-occluded object shadow. A couple of other things. The highlight slider here, if you want bloom in the sky or almost like a pseudo bloom, yes, leave that up at 1. Or somewhere in the middle. I put it down to 0. I prefer how that looks. You can get that back with bloom as well if you want later. Now, the actual shadow settings, I think by default, this is set to 0.5. It's set to the halfway mark. So what we actually want to do is increase that. So 0.55. And then the slope, again, user this may vary a little bit. You can kind of see the slope is the midtones. So I put this to, I think, just 0.8, which is, I think, the default value. And that's already looking really nice. The white balance, this should be around, for this shot, about 6,000. By default, I believe it's around 6,500 is what I think the default value is. So just put this to 6,000. This is going to effectively add more blue light into the image. Very similar to the skylight in Lumion. And I think you can do this in Twinmotion as well, just adjusting that sort of Kelvin value. I've turned off bloom. Some people like bloom, some people don't. Again, user mileage might vary a little bit on this one. But because I want a very, very overcast sky, take that bloom all the way down. But if you like bloom, bring it back, whatever, sure. But for this shot, I put it at 0. I wanted to simplify all of this. Lens flare, 0. Rainbow flare, not even sure what that actually does, so 0. And then vignetting. So normally I would add a tiny little dash of vignette, but again, just to simplify this, put it to 0. Now, there are two other sliders that are really important here, tint and saturation. In order to make this look a bit more realistic, the saturation we've actually taken this away. You can see CG artwork in general is very saturated, like all the colors are really pronounced, but photography isn't. And if you just look out your window, nothing looks like this, right? This super saturated. Also, nothing looks saturated if you're kind of like wear glasses like me, so whatever. But take the saturation down just a tiny, tiny amount will strip out some of that color. And I think we took it down to negative 0.18. And then the other one is the tint. Now, normally I wouldn't mess with this, but this was changed, I believe, with the preset. And so normally I wouldn't mess with the tint. I would just do this in Photoshop. But you can see if we take the tint to the right, it gets a bit too much. Take it a bit to the left, a bit too much. But just a small amount, like 0.05, will give a pretty nice result. And I think that looks pretty good. All in all, pretty happy with those. Let's take a look at the renders. Now, for the actual render settings, we just go to Image. I'll move myself to the top left here. You can see I've kept the original aspect ratio, although in hindsight, I probably just would have done original, but whatever. And we are doing 6K. Now, really important, if you intend to do AI post-production, you have got to go here to Channels and make sure this is turned on. And then make sure all the rest are turned on if you plan on going to Photoshop. That's kind of really important. If you just want the raw image, you can turn these off. You want that control, and even if you use the best AI thing in the world, if it's a single image, you still want to go into Photoshop. So just turn all these little guys on and go ahead and render this out. Let's take a look at the final shot, rendered at 6K and Overcast. First thing I want to point out is look how good that foliage looks. I think that just looks absolutely stunning. It's very sharp. They're all D5 renders are very sharp. We have no depth of field on the grass. I think I would probably do a different grass if I was doing this again, but whatever, needs must. But overall, the grass fidelity is so sharp. You can just see, oh my God, I think it's just incredibly sharp. Now, the Pampas models don't look great, and the AI will fix that. But the overall building looks good. I mean, if this was just your default render and you took this straight into Photoshop and did all sorts of Photoshop magic with it, I think you'd have a pretty nice render. And you can see the lights around on the inside. There's a little bit of warble going on. I believe that's from the glass material. And the reflections are okay. I'm not, it's not, whatever. It's okay. It'll work. But most clients who don't do ArcViz would be like, okay, this looks fantastic. Whatever it is, my home, my cabin, would be quite happy with this just as is out of the box. A little bit of bending going on here, but all in all, for a raw render, no Photoshop, no post-production, it's really nice. It's really, really nice. Okay, scene 2 is created using a HRI that a lot of Twinmotion users are probably very familiar with, which is Lenong 3. Now, Lenong 3 comes, I believe, with Twinmotion by default. It is also accessible through polyhaven.com, where most of us have gotten a lot of HRIs over really the last 5 or 6 years, I think, at this stage. Great website, great resource. Polyhaven is brilliant. Also, there's a Polyhaven add-on that comes in for Blender now, which is pretty cool too. Lenong 3 is one of the ones that a lot of Twinmotion users use because, again, it's a beautiful overcast. There's no highlights. There's no excessively dark shadows. It's a beautiful ambient. And you can load this up. By the way, this comes up in, I believe, 2468 and I think 16K. And so what we've done is basically loaded this up as our HDRI. So you can go here to custom or default and go custom, and there's a little folder on the right that will allow you to load up from a hard drive. Please note that if you load up a HDRI from somewhere else outside of D5, it will only be in about 2K resolution in the viewport. It does not render it full scale when you're actually working in the viewport. It will when you render it, but an 8K one is about 50 megabytes. I think it wasn't too bad download speed nor upload speed. So I think you should get away with an 8K would be fine. I don't see a reason to use a 16K HDRI just yet. Again, in order to keep consistency's sake here, we have ensured that the skylight is set to 0.600 and the background is 0.6 as well. Now, the only thing with the Lenong sky you want to be aware of is you can see it does come with some objects, some trees on the ground. So you have to rotate it so those are not showing up. So that's one point against it. Same sun settings, 0.27, sun disk radius, which will soften the shadows from the artificial sun, has been added, and the color temperature for this has been moved a little bit into the warm as well. It is set to follow the HDRI, and you could definitely turn that off and have sun, that fake additional sun coming in from a different angle could look really nice as well. We've turned off fog, wind, precipitation, and obviously the Milky Way, because why? So those are all off. And then under the effects tab here, you can see it should have the same exposure settings, negative 0.01, but you might, again, mileage will vary a little bit on this one. You'll also notice there is a very slightly different color feel overall. You know, this is our scene 1, and this is the HDRI Lenong. There's a slight tint with that one. There's a slight blue tint, I think, that comes in as well. So you can see, for the most part, the settings are pretty much almost identical. Now, when it comes to the effects tab, again, highlight local exposure. You can see without that, it's just a little bit too bright for our purposes. So clamp that a little bit. And then the shadow local exposure, same. We want really dark sort of ambient occlusion shadows. Now, on the contrast, I've also taken the contrast up a little bit on this one. Contrast, I generally would have done this in Photoshop, but sometimes you can get a really nice result, just very small sort of increase on the contrast here. Definitely less is more when it comes to the contrast slider. Now, in this case, the highlights, I've actually taken it up to 0.8. And again, the shadows, we added some shadows. So from the default, we've gone up to 0.6. The slope has remained the same at 0.8. And the white balance, we've moved it again a little bit more into the blue. Bloom, lens flare, rainbow, vignette, all just put to 0. And then the tint, we've actually added quite a bit of tint to this one to try and offset some of that blue effect. And then the saturation, again, negative 0.18. So this is the result of this one. And all in all, I'm pretty happy. Let's take a look at the final render. Again, 6K for this shot as well. So this is the raw render for scene 2. Now, it's not as sort of overcast as the other one. And the area I most have an issue with is the overall sort of the grass here. It's just a little bit too bright. Now, I don't love it as much as I like scene 1. I think Twinmotion does a better job with that HDRI than D5 did. Just you know, that could also be my settings as well. But we're still getting that really deep dark on the foliage. And the building itself, there's not any massive highlights here. Again, the interior render is almost practically the exact same. Now, I do have some lights in there, and that would ensure some visual consistency in there. But overall, I'm pretty happy with scene 2 as well. Here we're using another Polyhaven sky. This one is just literally called Overcast Sky. Again, it's 8K, same skylight and background settings. Also has the same sun settings. Now, I quite like how this one is being handled. You can see with the sun off and the sun on, just adding a nice little bit of warmth on the inside of the building. But under the Effects tab, and by the way, fog, wind, all the same, off. Under Effects, you can see we've got effectively the same settings, except the highlight local exposure, I've added a little bit of this. I haven't completely removed it, and I haven't clamped it fully. So I put it at around 0.6 or 0.7. The actual highlights we've left at about 0.3, shadow 0.6 again, and slope 0.8. We've got the same settings for tint, just a little bit of tint to the right and a little less saturation on the left. Now, all in all, I think this is absolutely lovely. Now, I still think 1 is the best. I think that's still definitely the best looking. But if we go back to scene 3, we do have one way to improve this that we haven't touched on. We mentioned the use of LUTs, and you'll notice that if we go to our environment tab over here and we scroll all the way up, there's no lookup table or LUT applied. And there's a lot of LUTs you can get online, and I want to show you one here. I like this Overcast. It's not quite there yet. Very good. I'm going to click on this one, which is an exact copy, except it has a LUT applied. You can see this LUT is Kodak 5218. When you turn these on, and by the way, D5 will come with default Kodaks you've got, or default LUTs. You've got quite a few of them. There's a couple that are really popular. The modern dystopian, especially at a low level, you can see there's kind of a nice look. The actual Kodak one that I'm using here, you can kind of see off, on, off, on. I don't know enough about photography or visual imagery to tell you exactly sort of what it's doing or how it's doing that, but it's a beautiful look. You can also adjust the intensity of these as well, and the overall rendered result will reflect how it looks in the viewport. One thing to note about this, I don't actually remember where I got these Kodak LUTs, but you can probably find them online. I'll try and link out if I can remember where I got these from, or where I most likely got these from, but it might require kind of rooting around the internet just a little bit to see if you can find these Kodak or Fuji LUTs. They should be available online somewhere, and again, I'll try and link out for them. But you can see the effect that just LUTs are going to have. And if I go to my library here, where I've loaded up a lot of different ones, you can very much alter the look of the actual render, and you're altering it in the rendering program before you go and do post-production in Photoshop or any other software that you want to use. And you can see, you can very rapidly change the look. Partial to these Fuji and Kodak LUTs, I think they sort of mimic photography very well. And so I like the look of them. They don't look as dystopian, and they don't look like an Instagram filter from 10 years ago. So I think they look pretty good. There's millions of these available online, and I'm sure there's these Kodak ones I think were free, but you can probably get really good ones if you're willing to pay as well. And they can really change the look of your image. What we're gonna do now is take a look at scene 1. We're gonna take a look at the AI effects. All right, let's take a look at that. And the AI enhancer will very much change the finished look. So I'm back on scene 1. Still my kind of favorite outside of the LUT render that we like. I still love the look of that, but scene 1 just as is. Okay, in order to use the AI tools, we have to go up to the AI post-processing, and we'll click on that. And I've already done a little bit of messing around with scenes 1 and 2. So I'll click on scene 1 here, double-click on that. You can see it'll go into this preview mode. So over here, we've got a couple of different options. We've got the AI enhancer, we've got the AI style transfer, and we've got in-painting. I'm not going to cover in-painting in this video. In fact, there's probably no need to, because the makers of D5 have a pretty good video on that already. It literally is, it's very easy to work with, quite simply, and it does a stunning job. But say we've already painted our landscape, and say we're not allowed leave it completely empty. Say we have specific looks that we're going for. Let's see what we can kind of do here. Well, the AI enhancer is going to do just that. And I did the AI enhancer on image 2, and I'll get to that in a second. But the one that's really blown me away lately is the AI style transfer. So I'm going to start with that first. So we'll click on this little again. We've got options for stylized. I haven't much messed with these. I do think they're very cool, and I think, you know, some people are just going to love this look, and well, maybe we'll cover it in another video. But it's the realistic ones that we're talking about. You can do a style transfer from reference. Again, you do sort of potentially go into kind of a bit of an odd gray area here. There are sort of ethical concerns, I think, in many ways about where you're pulling your reference from. So, for example, if you found someone on Facebook and you're like, I want my work to look like theirs, and you kind of just, you know, steal their pictures, I would find that very ethically questionable. But you don't even need to do that, actually. So what we ended up doing was using this spring-looking reference image. You'll notice that autumn, night, sunsets, these look like they're massively going to change your image. I didn't find that the spring one did. So let's take a look at how this actually changed the image. So we're in Photoshop with our renders done. This is the Scene 1 raw render. Again, beautiful shadows, nice overall kind of look and feel. Love this a lot. I mean, that is genuinely unbelievable. Let's look at the things that did well. The foliage up here, it just looks better. Like, there's just something about it. It does look better than the default, which is a bit scraggly looking. Okay, I'm granted that, bit scraggly. Looks absolutely gorgeous. Those shadows and the fidelity, it's absolutely incredible. I don't think there's anyone out there who wouldn't say that isn't actually impressive. The grass, look at that. The pampas plants, these sort of muley ornamental grasses, which I love a lot. I think they look really good. You can see they just didn't, you know, they didn't render very well. Part of that is just, I think, the opacity maps maybe. But look at this. I mean, that is absolutely staggering. Now, the grass itself also just looks a million times better. I mean, the D5 grass is good. It's really good, actually. And had you put in more stuff, or had I put in more like weeds and plants and things and like that, it would have looked even better, but, you know, time. That's incredible. I mean, that is genuinely incredible looking. It's not, when you zoom in, you do run into definitely some issues. It doesn't really resemble anything. You know, it's not you can't identify grass, and you can't really identify the weeds. But when you pull the camera back, it's convincing enough. And I think that's really good. Now, there is, however, one major problem, and that's going to be the building itself. If we look up here, this, surface-wise, does look really impressive, okay? You can see the wood paneling looks great. Oh my god, it's so well lit up on the inside. However, in fact, it definitely looks almost better at first glance. But if you look detail-wise, we zoom in a little bit, there's got some major issues. Firstly, it has decided to put what I can only assume is a mailbox or, you know, something here. And it's kind of gone a bit insane when it comes to the interior. Like, okay, we know that that's the original. That's the side of a sofa. And it's just done some weird things. It's put in some random stuff that just isn't there. Overall, it's just made a smudginess of it. It's kind of made a bit of a mess, quite simply. Again, on one level, on first glance, it looks very impressive. But the more you look, the more wrong it actually looks. Because it, quite simply, AI doesn't really understand the things that it's actually making or producing. Effectively, all it's doing is sort of what it thinks a thing looks like, but it has no understanding of the structure or the form. And I think, you know, even though the original D5 render is a bit jankier when we look really detailed, you can see the warping here, it still makes logical sense. And the enhanced style transfer one doesn't. Okay, so you're probably thinking, how do we go about fixing this? Well, what about blending between the two in Photoshop? So let's do that. So one way we could blend between the two is to select both of our layers, right click, duplicate these little guys, and there we go. I've got the enhanced on the top and the old one on the bottom. So we can just add a little mask, go down here, and I'm going to select layer 1 and add a mask. And this is going to allow us to partially paint out what we don't want. So what we can do here is just go, let's go to our paint bucket. And I'm going to hold down Alt, click on the mask, and just hit X. And so we're going to remove, basically there's nothing showing up. And then I'm going to go back to the mask and paint back in. And let's just say I put my opacity low. Let's take a painterly approach. I'm keeping the building, but I want to paint in the new grass. And initially you're thinking, man, this is great. Like, I can do this to my heart's content. Very, very nice. And yeah, looking really, really cool. And see, it's gonna make a few weird sort of issues in certain places, but you know, cool. And then we get to the building, and you can see that there's a bit of an issue right there. The style transfer has very much changed the dimensions of the building. It kept the same camera shape, perspective, all that jazz, but it's really re-edited the building in a way that we don't necessarily want. In fact, you can see right there, it has literally changed the shape of the building, which is not great by any stretch of the imagination. It's also very heavily changed the actual material of the building as well. And I don't necessarily know that I love that. It's made some executive decisions that I don't really appreciate, and it's made it harder for me to blend between the two. Now, there's certain areas where this is going to be really, really pronounced. Like if we go back to my mask here, and you can kind of see I'm painting in this lovely new grass, and then I get closer to the building, and I have to be very careful about painting these masks in down here, and especially where we've got hard edges over here. Look at this. Despite my best efforts, something is going to have to give. I cannot fully paint out this top layer. So you can see some slight problems with it. Overall, though, the grass that the style transfer has done, particularly on the models that weren't great, is absolutely stunning. I'm blown away by it. But just know that it hasn't, it's not magically going to fix everything. And you're still going to end up in Photoshop doing some post-production. And that's something to keep in mind. Now, let's take another look at one more element, which is the AI enhancer for these renders. Okay, everybody, so this is our scene 2. Now, if you remember, scene 2 was the Lenong Polyhaven HDRI at 8K with, kind of some of the settings we went through. Overall, I still love this image. I'm really happy with it. I think some of the pampas grasses actually look a bit better. Okay, look pretty nice. And the overall building is quite readable. So instead of actually doing the style transfer, in this case, what we actually ended up doing was going scene 2, and we used the AI enhancer. Now, this is not the style transfer. They're two separate processes. And this was the enhancement weight set to the default of 7. So just the bog standard. I didn't change anything, just default value set to 7. And you can see on my layers, this is the raw render, and this is the AI enhanced one. Now, you can see, in particular, the thing that's going to look a lot better is going to be the reflections. You can see that layer 1 is just going to look at those reflections. I think they're really nice. They're really, really nice, in fact, on the actual glass. That's one area where I'm very, very happy with that AI tool. I think the reflections just look better. You'll also notice that the AI enhancer has not changed the form or shape of the actual building. In fact, it hasn't added anything in, for better or worse. it's kept everything pretty nice. Now, onto the grass. You can see it's really made those blades of grass look lovely. Now, it's not as good, I think, or as creative as, for example, the style transfer, but all in all, these pampas grasses, these decorative grasses, do look a lot better. So I think the AI enhancer is definitely worthwhile running. And because these two images don't have any structural changes, you can paint in or paint out the changes to your heart's content. Now, we also ran the style transfer, and again, we did the spring one, and you can see very similar result. It's made the grass look incredible, even better. Look at that. Even better than the AI enhancer. The style transfer has done a much better job with the grass. And it's also added in a whole lot more, like, I don't know, weeds, clumps, dandelions, you know, sort of just more elements. But it's now also added graffiti to my building for some reason. Why? Don't know. And it's also very much literally changed the structure again, which is something I don't actually want it to do. Now, one thing to note, if we go back here to the AI style transfer, there is an option down here on the bottom to maintain the structure matching weight. Now, I'm not entirely sure, and the documentation doesn't feature sort of an explanation of what I think this does. I'm hoping that by cranking this to the right, it will give us a more consistent look for the actual building and not change that. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and run it. So, how did it look with the structure transfer weight at 1? Yeah, I hope you like brick walls. So, I'm not really sure sort of what that is supposed to do, but this has just gone slightly nuts. It's just gone absolutely crazy. I hope you like this tiny bench and brick walls on your sort of wooden cabin. Just, it's too much. It's just way too much. And the structure has again been changed. So, problematic. Okay, so a couple of thoughts just to leave off on this, on the idea of the AI tools. Firstly, the best result, I think, is still going to be the AI enhancer, just the standard enhancer, and then the style painter. So what that means is the style transfer. The AI enhancer will make your grass and your reflections look better. It'll also make the image look a bit sharper. It will not, however, fix a bad image. Secondly, the style transfer, although again, really very impressive, is going to sort of make a lot of changes to your shot. And they're not always changes that you're actually going to want. We just saw how it made the building larger. It smoothed out some of the design elements. It made the foliage and the grass look way better. But it also removes, in many ways, some of the agency and control that you have over the actual scene. It made the grass look better, but in many ways, it also just threw in a lot of random grass elements. It threw in a lot of weeds, it threw in a lot of disparate and kind of clashing grass types, threw in a lot of weeds for some bizarre reason as well. And upon closer inspection, yes, it made the pampas things look really good. But when you look closely at it, it still looks slightly AI sloppy. Just literally what's been referred to as AI slop. So yeah, on a surface, shallow level, it just makes it look good. When you look a little bit deeper, it's like, huh, that's grass, I guess. Now, one thing it does very well, I will say, is the texture gradient. This grass just looks very good in terms of the undulations and the shadows and the highlights. The texture, the visual look is very good. Just don't look too closely. Now, the other part is it'll do some just weird stuff. I mean, I hope you like a furry log in the back of your shot because that's just bizarre. Um, and then, the stuff it did to the interiors, I know it's a beta, I know it's a work in progress, but I liked my original basic interior. It was very basic, it was done for demonstration purposes. And I know that you can select parts that you want to enhance, but this is still, it's taking too many leaps with the actual process. So what I would, maybe suggest going forward is you need lush, verdant grass. We use the infill painting technique instead, which I didn't cover in this video. And that way you just let D5 create the grass. Now, the other last issue I do want to mention with this is control. When you hand paint your elements, you have control. You have control over the objects you place, where you place them. And for example, if you're told maybe that whoever commissioning you to do a render of their home, if they, give you very specific paradigms for what trees they want, what sort of foliage, what grass type, which, could happen, and the AI enhancer takes a swing at it, you're going to lose a lot of that control. And the other thing I've tended to notice about this is the AI enhancement works really well for a single render, right? It makes this one shot look good. There's no guarantee if I do a shot from another angle, it's not going to know how it made the first one look. So there's a good chance that every shot, the landscape, foliage, and elements all look different and disparate. And I don't like that. If you're going to put that much, time into working on the landscape, yeah, you want to keep those design elements. And this is not doing that for you. Okay, last thing I'm going to do is run through the actual physical post-production that I would do for our image. I'm going to use our LUT image, which is image scene 3 that we really liked. Let's bring it into Photoshop and do a little bit of blending between all of these elements. Okay, everybody, if you made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. Really, really do appreciate it. In order to wrap this up, I'm just going to run through the post-production that I would do on one of these images. So we picked image number 3, the one with the overcast sky and the LUT. And we've done the AI enhancer, and we've done the style transfer. We've also exported out a lot of the other render passes, and some of them will come in handy quite a bit in a second. So I'm going to go through step by step how I would do my post-production on these renders. A big thank you to all of you who've watched, commented, liked, subscribed, sent me random questions, and I just genuinely appreciate all the interaction. And I also wanted to say a big thank you to D5 Render, the creators of that. Thank you so much for making an amazing software and for being really lovely to interact with. All of your messages have been so wonderful. And yeah, happy to keep talking about your program because I think it's great. And I think if you haven't tried D5 yet, maybe this video might convince you that it is definitely worth your time. All right, let's get into Photoshop, do some post-production really quickly, and we'll wrap it up. All right, let's get going. All right, so you can see we've got a lot of different files going on here. I'm going to do the file scripts load into stack method. I'm going to go for scene 3 LUT. I'm also going to load up the ambient occlusion, the material ID, the reflection pass, the sky mask, the upscale, and the Z depth, and the style transfer. So there's a lot of these that we're going to load up. And once we do that, we can just go ahead and click OK. Now, please note, the reflection passes and some of the other passes will only really apply to the original raw render. They won't apply to the other ones, so we're going to use them a little bit. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is make sure this is the right scale. It is. It's our 6K image. I'm going to move the original render all the way down to the bottom, hide everything else. There we go. The original one. Looks good. Very high fidelity. 6K D5 render is amazing. And what we're going to do is we'll drag out our AO. And I'm really only looking at how this is going to affect the home. Yeah. And change this to, and let's do overlay or soft light. Maybe do soft light, looks pretty nice. Okay, that's nice. And I'm going to bring the reflection pass down as well. And you can see with this one, I'm going to change the blend mode here to lighten or screen. I think screen is going to be our friend. Now, we need to mask out because really these are only going to be affecting the actual home. So we're going to need a pretty quick mask on this. So one thing we can do is we could use the material ID layer to actually give us our mask. So I'm going to hold down W and grab the magic wand, hold down Shift. Make sure this is set to, yes, tolerance of 30, contiguous, yeah, that's fine. And I'm going to basically select, that'll give me the outside material colors, lovely. Go back to our AO layer. I'm going to hold down, I'm just going to add a little mask here. And I'm going to click on the mask. You can see it's already come in, but I want to do a Control-I and invert that one. Now, I also, so you can see here, the AO should really only be affecting the home right now. So let's fix that. I actually need to flip this one more time. So I'll do a little Control-I. There we go. And I need to make sure that I paint white on the inside here. So I'm just going to grab my fluffy paintbrush. And I'm just going to make sure I'm on white. I'm just going to paint this in. And this is going to be a kind of quick and dirty little mask here. It's not going to be the most perfect thing. Always refine it as you go. And we don't have to worry too much about the bottom. Hold down. It's going to hold down Shift, drag a line across. There we go. All right. And if we zoom out, we should see now our AO. Yeah, no AO. There it is. And it's probably a little strong. Drop that little guy down to about half the strength. I don't want that interior of the house to be very dingy. A little bit darker. And I think then what we'll do is go back to this guy, do a Control-A and then a Control-C. So copy the actual mask. Go back to this one here, the LUTs, or sorry, the reflection pass. I'm going to add another mask and Control-V and paste that one in as well. All right, that all looks good. So background, slightly darker AO, and our little reflection pass. And that looks, I think, quite nice. Again, just drop the intensity of that a little bit. Control-D to deselect everything. Now, we're going to put the upscale, and again, I'm just going to take a look at that. You can see, making everything look a little bit nicer. All right, and I am actually going to move this below all of the others. So I think that's a nice blend right there. And the grass looks good. Okay, the hard part now will be blending this fellow, which is the style transfer. And so in order to do that, I'm going to merge pretty much all of these previous layers. Right-click, merge those layers, and duplicate them one more time. And here's our scene. This is going to be the style transfer, and you can see very different look, all right. And so what we need to do is maybe make a slightly finer or a better mask. We know that this is changing the shape of the house. You can see it right there, very pronounced. So what I'm going to do is grab my pen. I'm going to use the pen tool for this. This will give us the most precise mask. All the way down here. There we go, lovely stuff. Right-click, make a selection, feather it by 1. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, add our mask. All right, and you can see in this case, it's done a pretty, well, it's actually done a pretty bad job. So we need to invert it. Control-I. There we go. All right, it's got a few little scragglies are left, but you can see for the most part, when we turn this on, there's the new grass, very fine looking. And we just need to clean up the mask around the outer edges. You can see as we zoom in here, let's just delete that little spot. Yeah, we need to fix that up quite a bit. All right, so I'm going to grab my paintbrush, and there's no, really there's no sort of magic way to do this. I'm just going to brush out what I don't want there. And you can see, I'm just going to do this very, very gently. Now, we're going to run into an issue where there's no, we're going to have to eventually, something will have to give. We need to blend a little bit. And so in many ways, we'll just drop the opacity of our paintbrush. And we're just going to start painting in and blend our backgrounds. All right, I'll pause while I do this, and we'll come right back. All right, so that is our blend complete. So we've kept, as much as we could, and we've just painted in and out some of the other kind of goodies. So I think that looks pretty nice. Now, once we're happy with this, I'm pretty happy to hold down Shift, select all these, right-click, duplicate these layers, and merge them one more time. And I'm going to hide these other guys. I'm just going to put them in a group. And then we'll duplicate this new background again one more time. And we'll go up to Filter, Camera Raw. And when it comes to this, I'm generally just going to go immediately to my presets. And I'm just going to scan through these. There's always some that you'll find that I think just look a little bit better. And, some of them are going to be pretty pronounced. But you never know. You might just stumble across one that might change the look of the image a bit, but just looks a little bit better. And so there's lots of these available online. There's some really good ones. I get a lot of mine from Woodland presets. So for example, these pumpkin themed ones, I think they look pretty good. So what we'll do is we'll just find one that we kind of like the look of. Maybe this red smoke one right here. I do kind of like the effect that's having. Click on it and then just drop this a little bit. You can see the effect it's having on the histogram up there on the right. Remember, we still want an overcast image. So I think maybe somewhere low, like 36. Okay, then we go to effects here. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. And there's my transition sort of blend. You can kind of see where the new meets the old. But hopefully, whoever's looking at your shot won't be able to tell. Maybe that won't be their priority. Contrast, I'm going to increase the contrast a little bit. And, when it comes to post-production like this, there's no magic kind of approach to it. Just got to do what looks good. Highlights, pretty happy with the overall highlights and the white values. Remember, we want that overcast sky. Shadows are overall pretty good. And I think maybe if I increase the whites, it'll kind of lift the image a little bit more. You can see the image is very much weighted on the shadows as we look at that histogram. Overall color of the image, I'm pretty happy. Take the vibrance up a smidge and take the saturation down just to counterbalance that. And then I don't really need a huge amount of texture. Got a lot going on in this image already. Add a little bit of clarity. And then the dehaze, that dehaze is already kind of in the preset that we use. So I'm pretty okay with that too. Now, color mixer, there's not a huge amount of greens or blues in this. So we could maybe just saturate the oranges a little bit more. And you can see no orange, very strong orange. So just a little bit more to break that wood paneling pop a dash. And then the saturation on the trees, we can bring it down. You can kind of see here, lots of saturation, no saturation. So just bring that down a little bit more. Okay, with the blues. And then the last thing I want to do is a little bit of sharpening. And all I do is just randomly pick a number here. You want to avoid going to 1,000,000%. You can see that's just way too much. But just a little dash of sharpening. And lastly, we're going to do lens blur. I'm going to turn this on. Now, we could use the Z-depth pass that came from D5. But honestly, I'm very happy to let Photoshop just figure it out for me. You can see that's a nice transition. The background has gone very blurry. And we can also click these little buttons here and just ask Photoshop to do it for us. But overall, I think, honestly, where we had it was fine. Little bit there. And then we'll just drop the actual blur amount. Less is more. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and click OK. And let this process. Okay. So the last thing I just want to do is take a quick look. This was our very first, this is the raw image. And then this is our final combined image. All in all, really, really happy with the overall look. So again, I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it there for today. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you found this Overcast Sky tutorial and a bit of a dive into the AI tools in D5 useful. And I'll see you in the next video, which is coming pretty soon. All right, cheers.